So I was talking with a client a couple of days ago, and we started sharing war stories about business, the good, bad, and ugly, and and he was telling me some terrible horror stories, and I thought this might be interesting. This could be sort of a part 3 of our video series of so you want to open up an audio store. And Allison will link to the videos that we've done below. For the most part, I will say this business has been a tremendous amount of fun. Even when things are difficult, it's still a lot of fun because for me anyway, I'm ultimately doing what I love to do. So even when things are difficult or you have challenges, for the most part it's okay. But every so often something happens and it makes you wonder, what the hell am I doing? You should just forget all this, go get a job, and 9 to 5, finish at the end of the day, and have real holidays and so on.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
So I'm going to share a few, and these are just ones that I can share. There are some that I cannot share, and those are terrible ones. And some are still in litigation, believe it or not. Okay. This one is tragic and funny. Many, many, many years ago, back when Arnie Nudell, Paul McGowan, and I can't remember the third person's name, I apologize. They started a company called Genesis, what was it called? Speakers or Technology. Anyway, and Arnie Nudell, many of you will know, he was one of the founders of Infinity Speakers. And that somehow didn't work out, and he left. Together with Paul McGowan, they formed this new speaker company. And one of the speakers that they made was called the Genesis 200s. So four enclosure speakers. So you have a separate tower for woofers, separate tower for mids and highs, and repeat on the other side. Anyway, I sold a pair. We were delivering it to a client who was about 2 hours away, drove it to him, and we're carrying the woofer enclosure up the stairs, right? So my guys and I, there were 3 of us, and these woofer towers are pretty heavy. So if you can picture, you've got this rectangular enclosure about roughly 5-6 feet tall. And then at the base of the cabinet is a plinth, so it's wider than the actual enclosure itself, so that it gives some stability to the speaker. So the natural thing to do is to carry the speaker at the plinth, because that gives you some leverage to hold on to. I'm at the bottom, so I'm holding the speaker at the bottom, and my guys are at the top, and we're moving up the stairs. All of a sudden, the main enclosure just snaps off from the base and it hits the stairs. Now thank God, because we were relatively close to the stairs, there wasn't any damage to the enclosure itself. But essentially what happened was the entire enclosure just sheared right off from the base itself, the plinth itself. When we managed to get the speaker onto the landing, I took a look, and what had happened was the base, the plinth, is secured to the main speakers basically with wood screws, just very inexpensive and frankly weak wood screws. And so if you're carrying the weight on the plinth, there's a lot of shear force on the actual wood screw itself, and so it just snapped. And so I was shocked that the speakers would be built like that. And presumably they didn't think that you needed to use anything better, because it's just a plinth. But anyway, I learned my lesson. Ever since then, I've told my guys, never ever carry a speaker at the plinth. Always carry it on the actual body itself. And this is a good lesson for many of you as well. Just in case you ever have to move speakers, always try to carry the speaker on the body itself. Obviously never touch it, never go anywhere near the drivers. Anyway, we got the speakers up. We glued the enclosure to the actual plinth itself, and then we used proper screws in so that this would never happen again. And thankfully the client was very understanding, and everything went well.
Hooray!
The other horror story is many years old. Back when we had just really started the company, there was a speaker company called Scientific Fidelity. Was actually owned by the gentleman who started the show that was the competitive show to the Consumer Electronics Show, the Las Vegas Consumer Electronics Show. It was called The Show, THE, the Home Entertainment Show. Anyway, Mike Maloney, I think his name was. He had this company called Scientific Fidelity, and it was a nice looking speaker, beautifully finished and so on. But when I went to carry the speaker one day to move them to do a demonstration, this is back in '93 maybe, I naturally put my hand into the port at the back of the speaker. And as I lifted the speaker up, the port separated from the speaker, and the speaker fell from my hand to the ground. And that cracked the base of the speaker. I was stunned. I'd never seen anything like that. The port was essentially just lightly glued to the enclosure, and so it just came right off. So again, for those of you, be very careful. Try not to move your speakers using the port, any port for that matter. Always handle it with the body of the speaker. Okay, this one was also another nightmare. I was delivering a pair of Krell MRA master reference amplifiers. This was back when Dan D'Agostino was still with the company, and this was going to be his magnum opus amplifier. Beast. Thing weighs about 600 pounds, if I remember correctly, each amplifier. It was just an insanely huge amplifier. And in fact, the amps were shipped with these nylon straps. For those of you who might remember or know, back when refrigerators and dishwashers and things like that were very heavy, you would see movers with these straps that you would put on your elbow, around your elbow, and two movers would just carry it, lifting it with the leverage of these straps. Anyway, these amplifiers came with those straps. That's how insanely heavy they were. I had to make arrangements for movers to bring these amps downstairs to a client's basement. And the stairs were such that you would go down, it comes to a landing, it turns, and then goes down again. Because of the weight of the amplifier, we had 4 movers. Now, the problem is that while you have 4 guys and they can lift 600, 650 pounds, the problem is all that weight is concentrated into one enclosure that's not that big. So it's very hard for 4 people to carry going downstairs. And for whatever reason, they didn't bring the proper tools that they were supposed to bring, and so they decided to just carry it. Anyway, one guy, as they're going down the stairs, hurts his back and starts screaming and yelling, and of course everybody immediately put the amplifier down. The gentleman who hurt his back was in agonizing pain, and he was cursing up a storm, and of course the client's there thinking, oh my God, this is terrible, and anyway, on the spot, that particular mover says, that's it, I quit, and he manages to get up limp out of the house. And of course, the other movers, being his friends, don't know what to do, and so they left with him. So I have one of the 2 amplifiers on the staircase going down, just it was terrible. I didn't know what to do. Immediately called another moving company. They were able to come, and they brought a piano dolly, and we slid it down a sled, and we slid down the amplifier down to the basement. And then once we got to the basement, second part of the nightmare, turns out the custom-made cabinet that the client had made was a little bit too small. It was rough, if I remember correctly, about 1 inch on either side too small. The amplifier wouldn't go in. Now the client is upset. He is so upset. He goes upstairs, goes to the garage, gets out a powered saw, and starts sawing at the sides of the cabinet. I tried to restrain him. I said, no, don't do that. It's easy enough to contact the cabinet maker. He can come back, and he says, F that guy. I'm so tired of this. I want my sound. I want my music. I paid a lot of money for this. I'm going to do this myself. So he starts cutting the sides of the cabinet. And I tried to warn him. I said, the top of the cabinet has this beautiful marble top. It weighs a lot. And if you start cutting into the supports, it might cave in. He says, I don't care. He starts cutting into it. Anyway, thank God it didn't cave in. Now it looks like a mess. Just, he didn't cut it very well, so it's all jagged and so on. He just wants the amplifier to fit in. Okay, second problem. The carpenter was supposed to put rollers on the shelf so that the amp, once you get the amp onto the shelf, it'll just slide in very easily. If those of you who've ever gone to a cafeteria, you may recall or might know of, how when you're finished in a cafeteria, you take your tray over to the stand where you can just roll the tray and all your food and drinks, and they'll just roll it in to get washed. Well, they were supposed to put these industrial rollers on. The guy had forgotten to do this. So now we have this amplifier that weighs about 600 pounds, and we can get it onto the shelf. We can't slide it in. It's insane because we thought all this work had already been done. Now the client's really ticked off. Anyway, I run over to Home Depot. We get some of these carpet sliders. We managed to get the amplifier on top of the carpet sliders, and we're able to slide it in, so that was okay. And then I noticed another problem. Again, the carpenter was supposed to build an excess panel on the top of the cabinet so that we can get to the back of it and turn the amplifier on and off, reset it if necessary, and so on. Didn't do any of this. So now the client's really ticked off. Again, he gets out his saw and he starts, and I said, no, you can't do that. This is all marble, So we didn't finish that day. I come back the next time when he's gotten the excess panel cut in. And this time around, yes, the carpenter had come and finished it better. The edges were smoothed out. It looked a lot better. He had put in the excess panel, so now I could get to the back of the amplifier. We were able to plug everything in and so on. One more problem. Carpenter had forgotten to put in vents. Now this amplifier puts out a lot of power, and it produces a lot of heat. And so of course I told the client, we can't turn this thing on. So again, he has another meltdown. He picks up the phone, he yells, screaming and so on at the carpenter. Eventually all of that is done, and the installation ends fairly well, but it was quite insane. Okay, another nightmare story. It's back again when we first started, so back around 1992. A client of mine said, I'm going to introduce you to my cousin. He's a serial entrepreneur, has done really, really well, started a chain of pizza restaurants, has done all across Canada, has done really, really well. So anyway, a client calls me up and says, I want to buy an audio system, let's say $20,000. Put it together, whatever you want to do, put it together and deliver it and set it up for me. I said, okay. And that was his missive to me. That was his, So I put together the best $20,000 system I could. And I was so proud of myself. Load it all up in into my Chrysler minivan and get to the house. Now this is in a very Tony part of Toronto, like a gorgeous, beautiful, high-end area. I get to the place, I back up on the driveway, I go to ring the doorbell. About a minute later, the lady comes, opens the door and says, what do you want? And I said, I'm here to deliver an audio system for, and I won't say his name. She says, he bought an audio system? She comes out. Now she's barefoot. We're in the driveway. I open up the back of the minivan. She looks at all this stuff. She starts having a fit. I'm talking yelling, cursing. I mean, seriously cursing. Words I never heard in my life. At the top of her lungs in this very, very high-end neighborhood. Okay, I was embarrassed. I thought, oh my God, what's going on? She yelled, I swear, for at least 5 minutes. I finally managed to calm her down, and I said, look, I'm just a delivery person, right? I can either drop everything on your driveway or let me bring everything in. I'll hook everything up, install everything, make it all look neat and tidy, and then I will clean up the mess and I'll leave. She finally come down, she let me do it. I finished the job, and at the end of it, she was actually very nice. She said, I'm so sorry, he's supposed to tell me these things before he does whatever he does. He never takes me into consideration, and so on and so forth. So that's another crazy story. I could tell you more, but I think that's good for now. Now, second part of the video, clients from hell. So for those of you who think the customer is always right, I hate to break it to you, but it's not true. As I said earlier, I'm very lucky. Our business is just done out of passion, and so we get some of the best people you'll ever want to meet as clients. We're so lucky. But every so often, yeah, you get some not so nice and crazies. Let me tell you a story. Back in the 80s, I sold a pair of Apogee ribbon speakers. Allison will put a picture on it on the video. It's called the Apogee Duettus Signatures. Sold it to a client. Still remember him very well. And took them home. I followed up with him. He says, "Love the speakers. Thank you so much. Absolutely wonderful." Approximately 6 weeks later, shows up out of nowhere. He's really upset. Very, very upset. He says, "The speakers are broken. I need them fixed." I said, "Okay, no problem." Helped him to bring the speaker into the room. And as I'm carrying the speaker, I could smell something odd. It was like burnt, something burnt, something that's burnt. Anyway, take the cover off the box, and I could see that the entire wood part of the cabinet is charred. Like literally somebody imagine putting fire to the speaker. That's what it looked like. The metal grill was all charred, and the ribbons were all black. The tweeter part of the ribbon was completely disintegrated. I mean, this thing looked like it had been on fire. Both the left and right speakers. And I said, these speakers have been in a fire. He says, no, there was no fire in the house. These speakers are blown, they're damaged. They caught fire. I said, the only way they can do that is either your amplifier misbehaved or you cranked up the speakers way too loud. He says, no, I never did that. Anyway, I didn't want to argue with him. I contacted Jason Bloom, who was the president of Apogee at the time. Jason listened to it and he says, "Adrian, the guy is full of it, but I'm going to make it right. I'm going to send you a new pair of speakers. You tell him, however, this is not going to happen again. If he overdrives the speaker again, if it gets damaged in any way, shape, or form, we're not going to do anything for him." Now, keep in mind, these speakers were back then about $5,000 or $6,000, back in the 80s, so it was a lot of money. So Jason just sent a brand new pair to him. So that was quite amazing. Long story short, a year or so later, client comes by again. We were just talking, and he said, "Oh, by the way, yeah, that was really nice of you to do that for me." I said, "Well, I didn't do anything. It was Jason." He said, "Well, you helped. I want to tell you, it was my girlfriend. She was drunk. She had the system cranked too loud, and the speaker caught fire." So that's the story behind that speaker. Here's an interesting one. Right around the, I want to say mid-90s or late 90s, a gentleman came in. I greeted him and I said, "How can I help you?" He says, "Well, I want to buy the very best home theater system money can buy." Now, just put things in perspective. At the time, we were doing some crazy big home theaters, like really big. For those of you who will remember, projectors back then were the 3-gun projectors. Big, heavy, heavy-duty projectors would weigh about 300 or 400 pounds. We would have to reinforce the ceiling to install them. And then there was a product called the Faroudja, Faroudja, line quadrupler. These things cost about $50,000 US. And then you need the screen, and then of course it was all Krell electronics and all Wilson speakers. The system we had on display was over $600,000 US. So again, I wanted to make sure that I knew what the parameters were before we started going any further. So I asked him some questions like, how big is your room? How many layers of seats will there be? And is the room treated? And he says, forget all that. I want the best. Show me what you've got. I said, okay. I brought him into the room, turned on the lights, and he's stunned. He says, tell me about the system. So I told him what I just told you. Next thing I know, the guy is yelling at me. He says, you're a thief. You're a charlatan. There's no way the system is as good as what I've got. I said, what do you have? He says, I've got a Sony TV with the Bose AM5 satellite speakers. So again, those of you who don't know, they were little cube speakers. He says, I've been told by every dealer that that is the best system. You're telling me this big, ginormous thing is better than mine? You're so full of shit. I was stunned. I didn't do anything. Turns out, when he calmed down, that he was very proud of his system, and he should be, and was trying to get justification by visiting different stores and sort of saying, I've got a system better than yours, kind of thing. He had no clue that there was a whole different world above it. But in the meantime, he was yelling like crazy, and of course we had clients in the store, and anyway, embarrassing. Okay, one last story about clients from hell. We do manufacturer events on a regular basis, typically twice a year. We would invite manufacturers to come, talk to our clients, display and demo the latest products, and so on and so on. Anyway, we always serve food and drinks. Now, way back, we used to also serve alcohol. And to serve alcohol, you have to go to the place that you buy the alcohol. In Ontario, it's all governed and licensed. You don't go to a corner store and buy liquor. You have to actually go to a proper outlet that is regulated by the government. Anyway, I go in there. I have to apply for a license, a temporary license, pay them money to serve alcohol, and so on. Anyway, so we used to serve alcohol like beer and wine and sometimes hard liquor as well. One time, a gentleman came in with some friends. They all drove, and as the day goes on, I notice he keeps drinking, and he's not drinking like wine and beer. He's drinking the hard stuff. And in fact, he's the one, he started sitting down with the bottle in his hand and just kept helping himself. The one guy that I had tasked to look after serving the wine was so intimidated by this guy, he just let him take the whole bottle. Anyway, I went to the guy and I said, look, I think you've had enough. He starts swearing up a storm at me. He says, F you, what the hell do you know? And you guys, throw a horrible party, and, the party's supposed to be drinking and all this stuff. Nobody's drinking except for me. Anyway, I tried to calm him down. A whole bunch, of course, clients are all here. We had literally over 50 or so people in the store. And of course, they all understood this guy's drunk. It got to a point where I had to tell him, you have to leave. Eventually he says, fine, I'm going to leave your horrible establishment and so on. And he wants to drive. And of course, we stopped him from doing that. And he wanted to start fighting with me. And of course, I called the cops. Cops came and took his keys away. We called the cab for him, and then he left. Anyway, many days later, he calls and he apologizes and so on, and everything worked out fine, but that was another interesting situation. Now, along the same story, because we serve food, there was a time for about a year and a half where there was this particular gentleman. I call him a gentleman. He would come with his family, wife and 2 grown sons, and every event that we had, they would come. They would stand around the sushi corner. So we would serve sushi and sandwiches and, meat with cheese and so on, right? And they would stand around the sushi area and load up their plates. I mean, literally. So a sushi party platter would be about maybe 80 or 90 pieces. I mean, they would just load up, the 4 of them, and eat all the sushi. And that's okay if other people were also allowed to have some. They would just eat it all, and then right after they were finished, they'd look around to see if there's any more sushi, and if not, they would leave. I mean, they didn't even have the courtesy of coming into the rooms, talking with the... They had no interest whatsoever in the audio. Somehow, they got on our mailing list and discovered that there was going to be free food, free sushi, and they would come and eat all the sushi. So after about the fourth or fifth occurrence, I went up to the person and I said, look, I don't mind that you eat my food. I've invited you. God only knows I wish who he was. I knew who he was, so I could, delete him from the invitation list. But I said, shouldn't you leave some for other people as well? He looked at me with anger in his eyes, like he was affronted, that I would even dare to say something like that. He continued to eat, munch, and then all of them left. So then, the next time when they came for another event, I stopped them at the door and I said, look, you're not welcome. I don't know who you are. I don't know how you got into our invitation list, but you're not welcome. I've never been so forthright to a family before, especially in front of the wife and kids. But I just thought this was too much. So anyway, that's it for now for this particular video. I'd love to, if you've run your own business or you've been involved in hospitalities, or I'd really love to read about your stories and have a chuckle. Anyway, put them in the comments below, and thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.